but my father warned me never to go to the cabin. I went anyway. The keys to the cabin felt heavier than they should have in my palm as I stared at the rusted padlock hanging from the weathered door. 22 years of my father's warnings echoed in my head. Asterisk, the floorboards are rotted through, Sarah. You'll break your neck. The whole structure could collapse any day. Promise me you'll never go there alone. Asterisk. But Grandma Eleanor's dying words 3 days ago had shattered every excuse he'd ever given me. The cabin, sweetheart, she'd whispered, her papery fingers clutching mine with surprising strength. Asterisk, your father, the business money, it's all there. He's been lying to you about everything. Asterisk. I thought it was the morphine talking. Grandma had been on heavy painkillers for weeks, drifting in and out of coherent conversation. But then she'd pressed these keys into my hand, keys I'd never seen before, and rattled off the exact location of a lockbox hidden behind loose stones in the cabin's fireplace. Asterisk, Hawthorne and Associates account, $73,000, your college fund, your inheritance, he took it all, Sarah. The receipts are there. Make him pay. Asterisk. My hands trembled as I fitted the smaller key into the padlock. It opened with a satisfying click that seemed to echo through the pine trees surrounding the property. The heavy wooden door groaned as I pushed it open, and late afternoon sunlight streamed through grimy windows, illuminating dancing dust motes and a completely intact interior. No rotted floorboards. No structural damage. No danger whatsoever. The cabin looked exactly like it had during my childhood visits, before Dad suddenly declared it off limits when I turned 12. Same faded plaid couch, same stone fireplace, same knotty pine walls. The only difference was the filing cabinet that definitely hadn't been there before, sitting in a corner like a silent confession. My phone buzzed. Dad. Asterisk, where are you? You missed dinner. Asterisk. I'd told him I was driving to Portland to clear my head after Grandma's funeral, buying myself a whole weekend. He had no idea I was 30 minutes from our house, standing in the place he'd spent a decade convincing me was a death trap. Asterisk, got a late start. Staying at Emma's tonight. Asterisk. Asterisk, drive safe. Love you. Asterisk. The casual affection in his text made my stomach turn. How many times had he said he loved me while stealing my future? I approached the fireplace with Grandma's instructions playing in my mind. Third stone from the left, second row from the bottom. It shifted easily when I pressed it, revealing a metal lockbox that fit the larger key perfectly. Inside, bank statements, transfer receipts, and a leather ledger filled with Dad's meticulous handwriting. Hawthorne and Associates Construction, the family business that had supported 3 generations of our family, the business that was supposed to be mine someday. The numbers swam before my eyes. $73,000 from my college fund, moved to his personal account the month before my 18th birthday. Another $45,000 from Grandma's medical fund, transferred just 6 months ago. Equipment purchases that never happened. Contractor payments to companies that didn't exist. My inheritance, my future, methodically stolen and hidden away while he played the devoted father, always worried about my safety, always protecting me from the big scary world. I pulled out my phone and started photographing everything. Every receipt, every bank statement, every page of that damning ledger. Time to show him exactly how dangerous this cabin could be. The photographs took longer than expected. By the time I documented everything in the lockbox, the sun had disappeared behind the tree line, and the cabin was growing dark. I switched on my phone's flashlight and kept working, determined to capture every piece of evidence before I lost my nerve. The filing cabinet proved to be unlocked, Dad's arrogance, assuming no one would ever make it this far. Inside, manila folders were meticulously organized by year, dating back to 2018. The year everything changed. The year he suddenly became so protective, so concerned about my whereabouts, so insistent that I focus on my studies instead of learning the family business. Now I knew why. The first folder contained incorporation documents for Clearwater Development LLC, a shell company registered to a P.O. box in the next county. The signature matched Dad's handwriting perfectly. According to the paperwork, Clearwater had been awarded dozens of subcontracts from Hawthorne and Associates over the past 4 years. Electrical work, plumbing, site preparation. All for inflated amounts, all paid to an account that led straight back to him. $47,000 in 2019. $62,000 in 2020. The numbers kept climbing. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Emma, my supposed alibi. Asterisk, your dad just called looking for you. Said you told him you were staying with me? I covered, but he sounded weird about it. Everything okay? Asterisk. My blood went cold. Dad never checked up on me like that. In 22 years, he'd never once called my friends to verify my whereabouts. He trusted me completely, or at least, he'd always acted like he did. Asterisk, what did you tell him? Asterisk. Asterisk, that you were in the shower. He asked if you seemed upset about your grandma. I said yes, obviously. But Sarah, he kept asking when you'd arrived, if you'd mentioned going anywhere else first. It was strange. Asterisk. My hands were shaking now. I forced myself to keep photographing documents, but my mind was racing. Had I said something at the funeral? Done something that tipped him off? Or was this just the paranoia of a man with too many secrets? Another folder revealed property records. Not just for our cabin, but for 2 other parcels of land purchased through Clearwater Development. Land that should have been bought by Hawthorne and Associates for a shopping center project I remembered Dad mentioning last Christmas. He'd been so excited about it, calling it the deal that would set up your future, sweetheart. Except according to these documents, he'd bought the land through his shell company for $89,000, then sold it to Hawthorne and Associates for $210,000. A neat profit of $121,000 that went straight into his pocket while he celebrated securing my future at the dinner table. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the performance. Every concerned conversation about my career plans, every promise that the business would be mine someday, every time he'd called me his little partner and asked for my input on company decisions, all of it theater, designed to keep me happy and distracted while he systematically looted my inheritance. My phone rang. Dad's contact photo filled the screen, the 2 of us at my college graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us grinning at the camera. I'd been so proud that day, so grateful for everything he'd sacrificed to put me through school. I declined the call and immediately started uploading the photos to cloud storage. Whatever was coming next, I wasn't going to lose this evidence. The phone rang again immediately. Then again. He knew. The third call went to voicemail. I could hear Dad's voice through the speaker, trying to sound casual but with an edge I'd never heard before. Asterisk K sweetheart, just wanted to make sure you got to Emma's safely. The weather's supposed to turn tonight. Call me back when you get this, okay? Love you. Asterisk. Weather. I glanced out the cabin window at the clear evening sky, stars already beginning to appear. There was no weather. I was running out of time. My fingers flew over my phone screen, uploading the last batch of photos to 3 different cloud accounts. The cabin's weak cell signal made each upload agonizingly slow, but I couldn't risk losing everything now. Not when I was this close to having enough evidence to destroy him. The final folder in the filing cabinet made my stomach drop completely through the floor. Sarah Elizabeth Hawthorne, Trust Fund Documentation. I'd never seen these papers before. According to the legal documents inside, Grandpa had established a trust fund for me when I was born, with specific instructions that I was to receive full access when I turned 21. The initial deposit was $180,000, meant to grow over 2 decades of careful investment. My 22nd birthday had been 4 months ago. Dad had taken me to dinner at Romano's, the same Italian place we'd gone to celebrate every milestone since middle school. He'd given me a speech about how proud he was, how I was becoming such a responsible adult, how my inheritance would come when the time was right. The trust statement showed a current balance of $847. $847. Out of what should have been well over $400,000 by now. Transfer after transfer, always with the same memo, educational expenses SEH. Except I'd graduated debt-free on academic scholarships. Every penny he'd stolen had gone straight into his personal accounts or been funneled through Clearwater Development. My phone was ringing again, but this time it wasn't Dad. The display showed a number I didn't recognize, a local area code. Hello? Sarah? This is Detective Morrison with the County Sheriff's Office. I'm here with your father, and he's quite worried about you. He says you've been under a lot of stress since your grandmother's passing, and that you might have gone somewhere you shouldn't be. The words hit me like ice water. He'd called the police. Actually called the police and convinced them I was having some kind of breakdown. I'm fine, I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm just visiting a friend. Your friend Emma says you left her house about an hour ago, upset about something. Your father is concerned you might have driven to your family's old cabin property. He says the structure is dangerous and that you've been fixated on it since the funeral. Emma. He'd called Emma back, pushed harder, and she'd cracked. Probably told him I'd seemed strange on the phone, maybe mentioned that I'd asked her to cover for me before I'd even arrived. The cabin's been condemned for years, Detective Morrison continued, his voice taking on the practiced calm of someone talking down a jumper. Your father has the documentation right here. If you're out there, Sarah, you need to leave immediately. The building could collapse. I almost laughed. Condemned. Of course Dad would have paperwork showing the cabin was condemned. He probably had a whole file of fake structural reports and safety violations, just in case someone started asking questions. I understand your concern, I said carefully, but I'm not at any cabin. I'm safe. Sarah. Dad's voice came through the phone now, and I could hear the desperation he was trying to hide behind parental worry. Please just tell us where you are. After losing Grandma, I can't. I can't lose you too. The performance was flawless. Grieving father, worried sick about his unstable daughter who might hurt herself in a dangerous building. Detective Morrison was probably nodding along sympathetically, thinking about his own kids. I'll be home tomorrow, I said. I just need some time to think. The cabin isn't safe for thinking, sweetheart. It's not safe for anything. But I was already hanging up, my hands shaking as I shoved the remaining documents into my backpack. Time was up. I had maybe 20 minutes before they arrived. The sheriff's office was 15 minutes away on a good day, and Detective Morrison had sounded like he was already in his car. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk Sarah, this is Emma. Your dad has me on speaker with some cop. He's making me tell them about every conversation we've had this week. I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. Asterisk. Poor Emma. She had no idea she was being used as a prop in Dad's emergency damage control operation. I could picture the scene, Dad pacing our living room in his concerned father routine, Detective Morrison taking notes about my concerning behavior since Grandma's death, Emma's voice shaking as she tried to answer questions about my mental state. I grabbed the last folder from the filing cabinet, and my breath caught. Bank statements for an account I'd never seen before, S.E. Hawthorne Educational Trust, custodial account. But these weren't the trust documents from the other folder. These showed regular deposits dating back to when I was 16. $2,500 every month for 6 years. Grandma's signature on every deposit slip. She'd been funding my future separately, without telling Dad. A secret nest egg that should have had over $180,000 in it by now. The final statement, dated just 2 months ago, showed a balance of 0. Every penny withdrawn in a single transaction on February 15th, 3 days before Grandma's stroke. He'd cleaned out her secret account while she was lying unconscious in the ICU. The sheer calculating coldness of it made me dizzy. While I was sleeping in the hospital waiting room, holding vigil by her bedside, Dad was transferring her life savings into Clearwater Development's checking account. While I was reading her get-well cards and adjusting her flowers, he was stealing the money she'd scraped together from her social security checks to secure my independence. My phone rang again. This time I answered immediately. I found Grandma's account, I said without preamble. Silence. Then, Sarah, where are you? February 15th, ring any bells? $183,247 transferred to Clearwater Development while she was in a coma. I don't know what you think you're. Stop. My voice came out sharper than I'd intended. Just stop with the performance. I have bank statements, incorporation papers, transfer receipts going back 4 years. I know about the trust fund. I know about the shell company. I know about every fake contractor payment and every piece of land you bought and sold to yourself. Another long silence. When Dad spoke again, the concerned father act was gone. His voice was flat, businesslike. You don't understand the full situation. Then explain it. The business was failing, Sarah. Has been failing for 3 years. Those subcontracts you found? That money kept Hawthorne and Associates afloat. Kept our employees paid. Kept food on our table. I could hear Detective Morrison's voice in the background, asking questions. Dad covered the phone for a moment, then came back. Your grandmother's medical bills were going to bankrupt us. The trust fund money, the college fund, it was all going to be lost anyway when the business went under. At least this way, I could salvage something. For who? Yourself? For you. Everything I did was for you. The words hit me like a slap. Even now, caught red-handed with $300,000 in documented theft, he was still trying to convince me this was somehow about protecting me. Headlights swept across the cabin windows. They'd found me. The police are here, I said quietly. Good. Come outside slowly, hands visible. Detective Morrison is concerned you might be having a breakdown. Of course he was. I could hear car doors slamming outside, followed by the crunch of boots on gravel. 2 sets, maybe 3. Through the dusty window, I watched flashlight beams sweep across the cabin's exterior, methodical and professional. Sarah Hawthorne? Detective Morrison's voice carried clearly through the thin walls. We know you're in there. Your father's very worried about you. I stayed silent, frantically shoving the last of the documents into my backpack. My phone showed the final batch of photos was still uploading, 87% complete. If they arrested me now, confiscated my phone, everything would be for nothing. The building isn't structurally sound, Morrison called out. We need you to come outside before someone gets hurt. Someone was definitely going to get hurt tonight. Just not the person he was worried about. My phone buzzed with another call from Dad. I answered but didn't speak. Sarah, listen to me very carefully. His voice was low, urgent. Detective Morrison is a family friend. He's trying to help you. But if you make this difficult, if you force him to come in there and drag you out, it's going to look bad. Like you're having a genuine crisis. The threat was crystal clear. Cooperate with his story about my breakdown, or he'd make sure the evidence I'd found would be dismissed as the desperate fantasies of a grieving, unstable young woman. How long have you been planning this? I whispered. Planning what? The whole concerned father routine. Did you call Detective Morrison before or after you realized I wasn't really at MS? Another pause. You're not thinking clearly right now. Grief can. Answer the question. I heard him exhale slowly. I called Tom, Detective Morrison, about 20 minutes after Emma said you were acting strange. I was worried you might do something foolish. Tom. Of course they were on a first-name basis. Probably golfed together, went to the same church, shared beers while complaining about their ungrateful kids. The perfect character witness for when Dad needed to explain away his daughter's wild accusations about missing money. Sarah? Morrison's voice was closer now, maybe right outside the door. I'm going to count to 10, then I'm coming in. This building has been flagged as unsafe for 3 years. My phone chimed, upload complete. I'd done it. Every document, every bank statement, every piece of evidence was now safely stored in 3 separate cloud accounts. Dad could have me arrested, committed, discredited, none of it mattered anymore. The truth was out of his reach. I'm coming out, I called, slinging my backpack over my shoulder. I opened the cabin door to find Detective Morrison standing on the porch with one hand resting on his radio. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with a kind of earnest expression that suggested he genuinely believed he was rescuing someone. There we go, he said, relief evident in his voice. You had us worried there. Are you hurt? I'm fine. 2 more officers flanked the porch steps, hands near their weapons but not threatening. Standard procedure when dealing with potentially unstable individuals. Dad stood behind them, perfectly positioned to look like the concerned parent rather than the man being investigated. Sarah, he said, stepping forward. Thank God you're okay. He moved to embrace me, and for one surreal moment I almost let him. 22 years of conditioning doesn't disappear overnight. But then I caught sight of his expression, not relief, but calculation. He was already working out his next move. I stepped back. Don't touch me. Detective Morrison frowned. Sarah, your father's been worried sick. He says you've been under tremendous stress since your grandmother passed. Have you asked him about Clearwater Development? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Dad's face went very still. What's Clearwater Development? Morrison asked, glancing between us. Nothing, Dad said quickly. Sarah, you're confused. It's the shell company he's been using to steal from the family business, I continued, pulling out my phone. I have 4 years of bank statements showing transfers to fake contractors. Want to see them? Morrison's expression shifted slightly, the concern for my welfare mixing with professional curiosity. Mr. Hawthorne? Dad spread his hands, the picture of wounded innocence. She's been going through my business files, trying to make sense of Grandma Eleanor's finances. I think she's confused some legitimate business transactions with something more sinister. Confused about $300,000? The number hit like a bomb. Morrison's eyebrows shot up, and I saw him reassess the situation in real time. This wasn't just family drama anymore. $300,000 is a significant amount, Detective Morrison said carefully, his tone shifting from family crisis counselor to investigator. Sarah, you mentioned bank statements. Do you have them with you? I started to reach for my phone, but Dad stepped forward quickly. Tom, she's been obsessing over paperwork she doesn't understand. Eleanor kept some confusing records, and with the grief. He shook his head sadly. I should have locked up the business files. I didn't realize she'd been going through them. The files weren't at home, I said. They were here. In that filing cabinet. I pointed through the open cabin door. Morrison's flashlight beam followed my gesture, illuminating the metal cabinet in the corner. His expression grew more serious. Mr. Hawthorne, I thought you said this building was condemned. Structurally unsafe. It is, Dad said firmly. That's why I was so worried when I realized she might have come here. Then why is there office furniture inside? That filing cabinet looks like it's been there for years. The silence stretched uncomfortably. I could practically see the gears turning in Morrison's head as he reassessed everything Dad had told him. The concerned father story was starting to crack. I stored some old business records here temporarily, Dad said finally. Before I realized how dangerous the building had become. When exactly was it condemned? Morrison asked. Dad hesitated for just a moment too long. 2019, I believe. Maybe 2020. I pulled up the photos on my phone, selecting one that showed the Clearwater Development Incorporation documents clearly. Detective Morrison, this shell company was created in 2018. The address listed is a P.O. box in Millfield, but all the contracts show work being done on Hawthorne and Associates projects. Morrison took my phone, angling it so his flashlight illuminated the screen. I watched his expression change as he read the incorporation papers, then scrolled through the bank statements I'd photographed. Mr. Hawthorne, he said slowly, can you explain why your daughter has documentation showing payments from your company to Clearwater Development? Those are legitimate subcontractor payments, Dad replied, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Clearwater handled specialized work we couldn't do in-house. According to this, Morrison continued, still scrolling through the photos, Clearwater Development lists no employees, no business address, no equipment. The only signature on any of these documents appears to match your handwriting. The other two officers were paying attention now, their casual stance replaced by professional alertness. This wasn't a mental health crisis anymore. I want to call my lawyer, Dad said. The words hung in the air like a confession. Morrison looked up from my phone, his expression grim. Sarah, these documents you photographed, where exactly did you find them? In that filing cabinet. And there's more. I pulled out the trust fund paperwork from my backpack. This shows a trust account my grandfather established for me. It should have over $400,000 in it. The last statement shows $847. Morrison examined the papers, his flashlight beam moving across the bank statements and withdrawal receipts. These transfers all show the same authorization signature, he noted. Mr. Hawthorne, as Sarah's custodial guardian, you had legal access to this account? Everything I did was legal, Dad said, but he was backing toward his car now. I used trust funds for Sarah's educational expenses, as permitted under the terms. I graduated on full academic scholarships, I interrupted. I never needed money for school. Morrison handed back my phone and documents, then spoke into his radio in low, professional tones. I caught fragments, possible embezzlement, financial documents, need a detective unit. Dad must have heard it too, because he suddenly became the concerned father again. Tom, please. She's been under enormous stress. Eleanor's death hit her hard, and now she's seeing conspiracies everywhere. This is exactly the kind of paranoid behavior I was worried about. But it was too late. Morrison was looking at him with cop eyes now, not friend eyes. Mr. Hawthorne, I think we need to continue this conversation at the station. The drive to the sheriff's station felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. I sat in the back of Detective Morrison's patrol car, watching Dad's taillights ahead of us, my mind racing through everything that had just happened. Morrison had been professional but kind, explaining that they needed to sort through the financial documents properly before determining if any crimes had been committed. Your father's retained counsel, he told me as we pulled away from the cabin. That's his right. But Sarah, these documents you found, if they're authentic, this is serious. We're talking potential felony embezzlement. The station was smaller than I'd expected, just a single-story brick building with fluorescent lights that made everyone look pale and tired. Dad was already inside when we arrived, sitting in what looked like an interview room with a man in an expensive suit who could only be his lawyer. Through the glass partition, I could see them talking in urgent whispers. Dad kept gesturing toward the hallway where Morrison and I stood, his expression cycling between indignation and panic. The lawyer, silver-haired, probably someone Dad played golf with, was taking notes and shaking his head frequently. Sarah? A woman approached us, extending her hand. I'm Detective Lisa Chen. I specialize in financial crimes. Detective Morrison filled me in on what you discovered tonight. Chen led me to a different interview room, this one equipped with a computer and scanner. For the next hour, we went through every photo I'd taken, every document I'd found. She asked detailed questions about dates, amounts, and my knowledge of the family business operations. This Clearwater Development Company, she said, pulling up incorporation records on her computer. The registered agent is listed as Marcus Hawthorne, that's your father. The business address is a mail forwarding service that's been flagged in 3 other fraud investigations. My stomach dropped. 3 others? Small-scale operations, but similar patterns. Shell companies, inflated subcontractor payments, family business funds diverted for personal use. Chen leaned back in her chair. Your father may have been running this scheme longer than just with your family's company. The door opened and Morrison stepped in, carrying a manila folder. We just heard from the bank. The Clearwater Development account shows $127,000 in transfers over the past 6 months alone. All from Hawthorne and Associates. Where's the money now? I asked. Morrison and Chen exchanged glances. That's where it gets complicated, Chen said. The account was emptied yesterday. All funds transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Yesterday. The day after Grandma's funeral. While I was at home crying and sorting through her photo albums, Dad was moving stolen money beyond the reach of U.S. law enforcement. He knew, I whispered. Somehow, he knew I was getting close. Chen nodded grimly. The timing suggests he's been preparing for this possibility. Sarah, when your grandmother was dying, did she try to tell you anything else about your father's business dealings? I thought back to those final conversations, Grandma's morphine-clouded words that I'd initially dismissed. She mentioned something about the others, said Dad had been stealing from other people too, not just family. I thought it was the medication talking. What others? Did she give names? She said something about the Henderson account and poor Mrs. Garrett's retirement fund. I wrote it off as confusion, but... My voice trailed off as the implications hit me. Morrison was already on his phone, speaking to someone about cross-referencing client names with Hawthorne and Associates business records. Through the glass partition, I could see Dad's lawyer standing up, gesturing angrily at another detective. They're not happy, Chen observed. Your father's attorney is claiming this is all a misunderstanding, that you've misinterpreted legitimate business transactions while in an emotionally fragile state. How much proof do you need? I asked. What we have is substantial, but financial crimes take time to build properly. We'll need forensic accountants, subpoenas for bank records, testimony from affected parties. She paused. Sarah, this could take months to resolve. And your father's legal team will likely argue that as a family member with potential mental health issues, your testimony is compromised. The door burst open and Morrison rushed back in, his expression urgent. We've got a problem, he said. Hawthorne's lawyer just filed for an emergency psychiatric hold. He's claiming Sarah is having a psychotic break and poses a danger to herself and others. The words hit me like a physical blow. A psychiatric hold? He can't do that. Detective Chen's expression darkened. Actually, he can try. In this state, immediate family members can petition for a 72-hour involuntary hold if they believe someone is experiencing a mental health crisis that poses a risk. But I'm not, I started, then stopped as the brilliance of Dad's strategy became clear. Paint me as unstable, and everything I discovered becomes the paranoid delusions of a grieving daughter having a breakdown. The evidence remains, but my credibility as a witness gets destroyed. Morrison was reading from his phone. The petition cites recent erratic behavior following grandmother's death, obsessive focus on family finances, breaking into condemned property, making false accusations against father. He's got 3 witnesses ready to testify, Emma about your strange phone calls, Dr. Richards about your emotional state at the funeral, and Detective Morrison's initial report about finding you in an unsafe building. Wait, Morrison said, looking up sharply. I never wrote a report describing Sarah as unstable. I documented a welfare check that found her safe and in possession of potentially relevant financial evidence. Chin stood up, anger flashing in her eyes. Someone's been very busy in the last 2 hours. Sarah, your father's lawyer, do you know who he is? I've never seen him before tonight. Harold Finch. He's expensive, specialized in white-collar defense, and he doesn't usually work weekends unless it's an emergency. She pulled out her own phone. Tom, what time did Hawthorne first call you tonight? Morrison checked his notes. Initial call came in at 7:43 p.m. He said Sarah had been acting strange since the funeral and might have gone to the family cabin. And when did he mention the cabin was condemned? Right away. Said it had been flagged as structurally unsound for years, showed me documentation. Chen and Morrison looked at each other, and I could see them putting together the same timeline I was. He called you before he even knew I'd found anything, I said slowly. He was already setting up the narrative about me being unstable and the cabin being dangerous. Which means he knew you'd figured something out, Chen concluded. The question is how. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Sarah, this is Harold Finch, your father's attorney. We need to discuss your situation before this goes any further. Your father is deeply concerned about your mental state and wants to get you the help you need. I showed the message to Chen, who grimaced. He's working fast. Sarah, I need to ask, have you been seeing a therapist? Taking any medication? Anything they could use to support a psychiatric hold? I saw a counselor at college for stress during finals, but that was over a year ago. No medication, no history of mental illness. A horrible thought struck me. But Dr. Richards did pull me aside at the funeral. Said if I needed to talk to someone about grief, he could recommend a psychiatrist. Dr. Richards is listed as one of the witnesses supporting your father's petition, Morrison said grimly. The door opened again, and a uniformed officer stepped in. Detective Chen? Judge Holloway is on the phone about the emergency psychiatric evaluation request. My hands started shaking. They can't actually lock me up, can they? The standard for involuntary commitment is high, Chen said, but she didn't sound reassuring. However, if a judge determines there's probable cause to believe you're a danger to yourself or others, they can authorize a 72-hour hold for evaluation. During which time my credibility gets completely destroyed and the evidence gets buried in legal challenges about my mental competency. Exactly. Morrison's radio crackled to life. All units, be advised that Marcus Hawthorne's vehicle is no longer in the station parking lot. Repeat, subject has left the premises. Chen swore under her breath. When did he leave? The uniformed officer looked uncomfortable. His attorney said they were going to get coffee while waiting for the psychiatric evaluation to be processed. That was 20 minutes ago. 20 minutes? Chen was already moving toward the door. Tom, call it in. I want units checking the airport, train station, and bus depot. Sarah, does your father have a passport? Yes, but the full implications hit me like ice water. The Cayman Islands account. He's not just trying to discredit me. He's running. Morrison was speaking rapidly into his radio, coordinating with dispatch. Through the chaos, I heard fragments, flight risk, possible international departure, freeze all accounts. But it might already be too late. Dad had transferred the stolen money yesterday, retained an expensive lawyer, filed psychiatric hold paperwork to discredit me, and now he disappeared while everyone was focused on my supposed mental health crisis. The psychiatric hold, I said suddenly. It was never about getting me committed. It was about buying time. Chen nodded grimly. Create a legal distraction, make us focus on evaluating your mental state instead of pursuing financial crimes charges, then slip away while we're tied up in procedural red tape. My phone rang. Dad's contact photo filled the screen, that graduation picture of us smiling together, before I knew what he really was. This time, I answered. Hello, sweetheart, he said, and his voice sounded different. Tired, but also relieved. I'm sorry it had to come to this. Where are you? Somewhere safe. Sarah, I need you to understand, everything I did because I love you. No, you did it because you're a coward. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care anymore. Where's the money, Dad? Detective Chan was frantically gesturing to Morrison, who was trying to trace the call. I could see other officers moving through the station with renewed urgency. The money is safe, Dad said calmly. It's in an account where it can't be touched by vindictive prosecutors or confused daughters who don't understand how business works. Confused? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. I found 4 years of documented theft. Shell companies, fake contractors, stolen trust funds. I saved that business. His composure cracked slightly. Hawthorne and Associates was 3 months from bankruptcy when I started the Clearwater transactions. Your precious inheritance would have been worthless if I hadn't acted. Detective Chen slid a note across the table. Asterisk, keep him talking. We're tracking the signal, asterisk. By stealing from Grandma's medical fund while she was dying? A long pause. When Dad spoke again, his voice was quieter. Eleanor was going to lose that money anyway. The medical bills were astronomical, and her insurance only covered 60%. At least this way, some of it could be preserved. For who? You just admitted you moved everything offshore. For you, eventually. Sarah, you're young. You don't understand how the world really works. Sometimes you have to break small rules to preserve something bigger. Morrison appeared in the doorway, holding up his phone. A text message was visible, asterisk signal traced to Burlington Airport. Units en route, asterisk. Burlington was 2 hours away by car, but only 40 minutes if Dad had been driving since he left the station. He could already be through security, waiting for a red-eye flight to somewhere without extradition treaties. Dad, listen to me, I said, trying a different approach. Come back. We can figure this out together. Maybe there's an explanation for everything I found. There is an explanation. His voice carried a bitter edge. Your grandfather built Hawthorne and Associates on handshake deals and small-town trust. That doesn't work anymore. Every competitor cuts corners, every client wants the impossible for half price, and every regulation makes it harder to turn a profit. So you decided to steal instead? I decided to survive. And I kept 37 people employed for 4 extra years because of it. Your friend Emma's father, you remember Jim Patterson? He works for us. So does Mrs. Chen from the grocery store son, and half the guys who coach Little League. Detective Chen looked up sharply at the mention of her family name, then shook her head and mouthed different Chen family to Morrison. Sarah, I could have laid them all off and closed the business legitimately, Dad continued. Taken bankruptcy, walked away clean. Instead, I found a way to keep everyone working while the market recovered. By stealing my college fund? By borrowing against your future to preserve it. The money would have been replaced once the Millfield Shopping Center project came through. The project where you bought land through Clearwater for $89,000 and sold it to yourself for $210,000? Another pause. You've been thorough. Morrison's radio crackled. Airport security has no record of Marcus Hawthorne passing through screening. Checking parking structures and rental car returns. He wasn't at the airport. Or if he was, he'd used fake identification. Dad, where are you really? I told you. Somewhere safe. The psychiatric hold paperwork, that was just a distraction, wasn't it? You never planned to have me committed. I planned to buy enough time to ensure certain financial arrangements were properly secured. His voice was getting colder, more businesslike. Harold Finch is very good at what he does. And what happens to me now? I'm supposed to just forget everything I found and pretend you're a loving father? You're supposed to understand that family protects family, even when it's complicated. The line went quiet for a moment, then, Sarah, check your bank account. I pulled up my banking app, dreading what I might find. My savings account, which had contained $3,247 this morning, now showed a balance of $53,247. $50,000, Dad said. Clean money, from a legitimate consulting contract I negotiated last month. Consider it a graduation gift. You think you can buy me off with $50,000 when you stole $300? I think you're 22 years old with your whole life ahead of you, and $50,000 is enough to start over anywhere you want. Travel Europe. Get a master's degree. Start your own business. Detective Chen was writing frantically on another note, asterisk the deposit came from a Cayman account 47 minutes ago. He's had access to offshore funds this whole time, asterisk. What about everyone else you stole from? I asked. Mrs. Garrett's retirement fund? The Henderson account? Silence. Dad? Sometimes people get hurt when businesses fail, Sarah. That's just reality. The casual dismissal of his other victims made my stomach turn. So you decided who deserved to lose their money and who didn't? I decided who had the best chance of surviving the loss. His voice was matter-of-fact now, like he was discussing quarterly projections. Elderly clients on fixed incomes can't recover from financial disasters. Young people can rebuild. I made practical choices. Morrison appeared with another update, speaking quietly to Detective Chen. I caught fragments, private airfield, charter flight manifest, and filed for Nassau, Bahamas. Nassau. A country with notoriously loose extradition policies and strict banking privacy laws. You planned this for months, I said into the phone. I planned for contingencies. Business 101, sweetheart. The endearment made my skin crawl. Stop calling me that. Sarah. His tone shifted, becoming almost paternal again. I know you're angry, and I understand why. But someday you'll realize that everything I did was necessary. The business world isn't fair, and nice guys finish last. So you decided to become one of the bad guys? I decided to become a survivor. The line went dead. Detective Chen stared at her phone screen, tracking the call's final ping. The signal cut off near a private airfield outside Burlington. But Sarah, there's something else. She turned her laptop toward me, displaying what looked like flight records. A charter jet filed a flight plan for Nassau 47 minutes ago. Single passenger, paid in cash. He's gone, I said, the reality hitting me like a physical weight. Maybe. But the flight hasn't taken off yet. Weather delay. Morrison was already grabbing his keys. Sarah, we need you to come with us. If we can get there in time, your testimony might be enough to prevent him from leaving the country. The drive to Burlington was a blur of blue lights and radio chatter. Detective Chen rode shotgun, coordinating with federal authorities while Morrison pushed his patrol car 20 miles over the speed limit. In the backseat, I stared at my phone, torn between rage and disbelief. Check your email, Chen said suddenly. If your father's as thorough as he seems, he might have sent you something. She was right. 3 new messages from Dad's personal account, all sent in the last 20 minutes. The first was a single line, I'm sorry it ended this way. The second contained a PDF attachment labeled Sarah's Future Instructions. When I opened it, my hands started shaking. It was a detailed financial plan showing how my $50,000 gift could be invested to grow into a substantial nest egg over the next 20 years. Complete with recommended investment firms, projected returns, and a timeline for major purchases like a house and car. Even while fleeing the country, he was still trying to control my life. The third email made me physically nauseous. I've left instructions with Harold Finch regarding your inheritance. When you turn 30, if you haven't caused any more trouble for the family name, there will be additional funds available. Behave yourself, sweetheart. Love, Dad. He's still trying to manipulate me, I said, showing Chin the messages. Even from the Bahamas. 30 years old, Chin noted grimly. Long enough for any statute of limitations to expire, and long enough for you to mature out of wanting justice for his other victims. Morrison's radio crackled with an update. Aircraft N847 Charlie is still on the tarmac. Passenger remains in the terminal building. Federal agents are taking positions now. My phone buzzed with a call from Harold Finch, Dad's lawyer. Against Chen's advice, I answered. Miss Hawthorne, your father asked me to inform you that he's prepared to return voluntarily if you agree to certain conditions. What conditions? A formal statement retracting your allegations of financial impropriety, agreement to undergo psychiatric evaluation to address your recent emotional distress, and a promise not to interfere with family business operations going forward. The audacity was breathtaking. Even cornered at an airport with federal agents closing in, Dad was still trying to negotiate his way out. And if I refuse? Your father boards his flight in 12 minutes, and you'll never see a penny of your inheritance beyond what's already in your account. Detective Chen was frantically gesturing for me to keep Finch talking, but I'd heard enough. After 22 years of his manipulation and 4 hours of discovering the extent of his crimes, I was done being afraid of Marcus Hawthorne's threats. Mr. Finch? Tell my father he can keep his blood money. Tell him I choose justice over inheritance. I hung up just as Morrison's radio erupted with urgent chatter. Suspect is moving toward the aircraft. Repeat, suspect is attempting to board. Through the windshield, I could see the private airfield's lights approaching fast. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine whether Dad escaped to his offshore paradise or finally faced consequences for what he'd stolen from me, from Grandma Eleanor, and from all his other victims. Time was up. The private airfield was smaller than I'd expected, just a single runway cutting through farmland, with a modest terminal building that looked more like an oversized garage. As Morrison's patrol car screeched into the parking lot, I could see the charter jet sitting on the tarmac, engines already spinning up for departure. There, Chin pointed toward the terminal windows. Dad stood near what looked like a boarding gate, his silhouette unmistakable even at this distance. He was checking his watch repeatedly, probably counting down the minutes until he could disappear forever. Federal agents had positioned themselves around the building's exits, but they couldn't move until we arrived. Something about jurisdiction and the need for local law enforcement to coordinate the arrest. Legal technicalities that might cost us everything. Morrison was already out of the car, speaking rapidly into his radio. Subject is visible in the terminal. We're moving to intercept now. But as we approached the building, my phone rang again. Dad's number. Don't answer it, Jin warned, but I was already hitting accept. If he wanted to negotiate, I needed to hear what he was really offering. Sarah, you can still stop this. His voice was tight with stress. Call off your detective friends and we can work something out. Like what? More fake inheritance promises? Like real money. The Cayman account has $340,000 in it. That's everything I moved, plus interest. Walk away now, and I'll transfer half of it to your account within the hour. Through the terminal windows, I could see him pacing near the gate, phone pressed to his ear. The federal agents were closing in, but they were moving slowly, probably trying not to spook him into running for the plane. $170,000, Sarah. More than your original trust fund was ever worth. Take it and let me disappear quietly. What about Mrs. Garrett? The Hendersons? Your other victims? They'll get restitution from the business insurance once Hawthorne and Associates files bankruptcy. Everyone wins. Detective Chan was listening to our conversation on speaker, shaking her head vigorously. She held up her phone, showing me a text. Asterisk business insurance doesn't cover embezzlement. He's lying, asterisk. You're lying, I said into the phone. Insurance doesn't cover theft. A long pause. Through the window, I saw Dad stop pacing. Sarah, listen to me very carefully. In about 30 seconds, federal agents are going to try to arrest me. If that happens, every penny in the offshore accounts gets frozen in litigation for years. Your neighbors, grandma's friends, everyone you're so worried about, they'll never see a dime. And if you get away? I'll send monthly payments from NASA. Clean, untraceable transfers that can't be seized by prosecutors. Mrs. Garrett gets her retirement money back. The Hendersons get made whole. Everyone gets compensated. Morrison was gesturing urgently toward the terminal. The federal agents had reached the entrance and were preparing to move in. But only if you call them off right now, Dad continued. Tell Detective Chen this was all a misunderstanding. Say you were confused about the business records. Give me 60 seconds to reach that plane. My finger hovered over the disconnect button. Through the glass, I could see the federal agents entering the terminal, their movements coordinated and professional. In moments, they'd reach Dad's position. The victims, Dad. Swear on Grandma's grave that you'll send them restitution. I swear on Eleanor's memory. Monthly payments starting next week. Detective Chen was frantically shaking her head, but I thought about Mrs. Garrett's social security checks, about the Henderson family's savings, about all the people whose trust Dad had violated. If he disappeared with the money, they'd never recover a penny. But if he got away and actually followed through on his promise. Sarah? Dad's voice was urgent now. I can see federal agents. You have 10 seconds to decide. Through the window, I watched the agents approach Dad's position. He was trapped between them and the boarding gate, his escape route rapidly disappearing. Promise me something else, I said quickly. Anything. Promise me you'll never contact me again. No birthday cards, no Christmas presents, no surprise visits when I turn 30. You disappear completely. I promise. And promise me that if you ever come back to the United States, you'll turn yourself in and face charges properly. Another pause. The federal agents were 20 feet away now. I promise, he said finally. I looked at Detective Chen, who was staring at me with an expression of disbelief and disappointment. Sarah, don't, she started. But I'd already made my decision. Dad? I said into the phone. I hope those federal agents catch you. I hung up and watched through the window as the agents closed the final distance. Dad's face went white as he realized I'd chosen justice over his blood money. The arrest happened quickly, no dramatic chase scene, no desperate struggle. Just handcuffs and rights being read while a charter jet sat empty on the tarmac. Justice, it turned out, was quieter than I'd expected. 6 months later, I sat in the federal courthouse watching my father's sentencing hearing, surrounded by faces I'd never seen before but whose stories I knew by heart. Mrs. Garrett, 83 years old with arthritis-gnarled hands clutching a tissue. The Henderson family, Mike, Janet, and their teenage daughter Emma who'd been planning to start college next fall before discovering her education fund had vanished. 7 other victims Detective Chen had uncovered during the investigation, each representing years of stolen security and broken trust. The prosecution had built an airtight case. Dad's Clearwater development scheme had netted over $800,000 across 4 years, nearly double what I'd initially discovered. The additional victims included elderly clients who trusted him with their retirement planning, a veterans disability settlement, and funds from a church building project that never got built. Your Honor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez addressed the judge. The defendant's crimes represent a systematic betrayal of trust spanning multiple years and affecting vulnerable community members. We're recommending 8 to 10 years federal prison, plus full restitution. Dad sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit that made him look smaller somehow, diminished. His expensive lawyer, a different one than Harold Finch, who'd quietly withdrawn after Dad's arrest, had spent 3 days arguing for leniency based on family business pressures and Dad's otherwise exemplary character. It was surreal hearing my childhood described as evidence of Dad's fundamental goodness. Soccer practices, birthday parties, bedtime stories, all presented as proof that Marcus Hawthorne was really just a loving father who'd made some regrettable business decisions under stress. The most damaging testimony had come from forensic accountant Jennifer Walsh, who'd traced every fraudulent transaction with surgical precision. The Cayman Islands account contained $342,000 when it was frozen, money that would be returned to victims through a court-supervised restitution process. But another $400,000 had already been moved through cryptocurrency exchanges and shell companies in 3 different countries. Mr. Hawthorne demonstrated sophisticated financial planning in concealing these assets, Walsh had testified. This wasn't desperate embezzlement. It was methodical, long-term theft with extensive money laundering components. I'd been called to testify on the 3rd day, walking through my discovery of the cabin evidence while Dad stared at the defense table. His lawyer had tried to paint me as a vindictive daughter pursuing a family grudge, but Detective Chen's corroborating testimony about the offshore accounts and fake documentation had demolished that narrative. The hardest moment came when Dad's lawyer asked if I'd ever received money from the Cayman account. Yes, I'd admitted. $50,000 was deposited into my savings account the night he was arrested. And you kept this money? No. I transferred all of it to a victim compensation fund administered by the court. I'd seen Dad's face when I said that, a flicker of something between surprise and hurt that almost made me feel guilty. But Mrs. Garrett was sitting in the gallery behind me, and I remembered her social security statements showing $127 in monthly income after Dad stole her retirement savings. Now Judge Patricia Henley was reviewing the sentencing guidelines while the courtroom waited in tense silence. Dad's new lawyer had filed motions arguing that his cooperation with asset recovery efforts should reduce his sentence, but the cooperation had been minimal, mostly just admitting to crimes the evidence already proved. Mr. Hawthorne, Judge Henley said finally, looking directly at my father. Before I impose sentence, do you wish to make a statement? Dad stood slowly, his shackles rattling. For a moment I thought he might finally offer a genuine apology to his victims. Instead, he turned slightly toward where I sat in the gallery. I want my daughter to know that everything I did was motivated by love for her and concern for our family's future, he said. I hope someday she'll understand that sometimes protecting the people you care about requires difficult choices. The words hit me like a slap. Even now, facing federal prison, he couldn't admit what he'd really done or express genuine remorse for the lives he'd destroyed. It was still everyone else's fault, still justified by his twisted logic about protecting family. Mrs. Garrett stood up in the gallery. Your Honor, may I respond? Judge Henley nodded. That man stole my husband's life insurance money, Mrs. Garrett said, her voice shaking but clear. Money we saved for 43 years so I wouldn't be a burden on my children. I lost my house because of him. I'm living in a 1-bedroom apartment and choosing between groceries and medications because of his difficult choices. The judge's expression hardened. Mr. Hawthorne, you've shown no genuine remorse for the devastating impact of your crimes on vulnerable community members. I hereby sentence you to 9 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years supervised release. You're also ordered to pay full restitution of $847,000 to affected victims. 9 years. Dad would be 62 when he got out, assuming good behavior. The family business was gone, liquidated to pay legal fees and partial restitution. The cabin had been sold to cover court costs. As the marshals led Dad away, he looked back one final time. Our eyes met across the courtroom, and for just a moment I saw not the calculating manipulator who'd stolen my inheritance, but the father who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped with homework and promised me the world. Then the door closed, and Marcus Hawthorne disappeared into the federal prison system. I walked outside into bright September sunshine, feeling simultaneously vindicated and hollow. Justice was messier than I'd expected, no dramatic confessions, no tearful reconciliations, just paperwork and prison sentences and elderly victims who'd never fully recover their losses. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Chen, saw the news coverage. How are you holding up? I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, free. The worst part about the whole ordeal wasn't the betrayal or even the stolen money, it was how normal everything felt in the weeks that followed. I'd expected some kind of dramatic transformation, like uncovering my father's crimes would fundamentally change who I was or how I saw the world. Instead, I just felt tired. Detective Chen called me 3 weeks after Dad's arrest with an update that made my stomach drop. Sarah, we've uncovered something else. Remember how your grandmother mentioned the others before she died? We found a safety deposit box registered under Eleanor Hawthorne's name, rented just 2 months before her stroke. I met her at First National Bank on a gray October morning, armed with a death certificate and executor paperwork that made me Grandma's legal heir. The safety deposit box was small, containing only a manila envelope with my name written in Grandma's careful handwriting. Inside were photocopies of bank statements I'd never seen before, accounts at 3 different banks, all showing systematic withdrawals over the past 18 months. But these weren't Dad's accounts. They belonged to people I recognized from church, from the grocery store, from around town. Margaret Dunn, I read from the first statement. She runs the flower shop on Maple Street. Detective Chen looked over my shoulder. 37,000 withdrawn in increments over 8 months. Same pattern as the other victims. The second statement belonged to Robert Chen, Detective Chen's uncle, it turned out. He hired your father to handle some investment planning after he retired from the fire department, she said quietly. We had no idea he was being victimized too. There were 7 names total, all elderly residents who trusted Dad with their financial planning. Grandma had somehow discovered what he was doing and documented it, probably realizing she couldn't confront him directly without putting herself at risk. The dates on these withdrawals, I said, studying the patterns. They all started right after I graduated college. Chen nodded grimly. When you became an adult and he could no longer justify using your trust fund for educational expenses, he needed new sources of money to maintain his lifestyle. My phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, the voice was familiar. Sarah? This is Harold Finch. Dad's original lawyer, the one who disappeared after the psychiatric hold attempt failed. I almost hung up, but Chen gestured for me to keep him talking. Mr. Finch, I thought you were no longer representing my father. I'm not. I'm calling because there's something you need to know about your grandmother's final weeks. Something that might change how you understand what happened. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near the courthouse. He looked older than I remembered from that night at the police station, with deep lines around his eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. Your grandmother called me 6 weeks before she died, Finch said without preamble. She'd been keeping tabs on your father's business dealings, and she knew exactly what he was doing. Then why didn't she stop him? Because she was planning something bigger. Eleanor had been quietly gathering evidence for months, building a case that would expose not just her father's embezzlement, but a whole network of financial advisors operating similar schemes throughout the county. He slid a flash drive across the table. She gave me this the day before her stroke. Said if anything happened to her, I should make sure you got it. My hands were shaking as I picked up the drive. What's on it? Everything. Communications between your father and 5 other financial advisors, all sharing strategies for manipulating elderly clients. Bank routing numbers for accounts in 7 different states. Documentation of a money laundering operation that makes your father look like small potatoes. The implications hit me like a freight train. Grandma hadn't just discovered Dad's crimes, she'd uncovered evidence of a much larger conspiracy. And she'd been gathering proof when her stroke conveniently removed her from the equation. Mr. Finch, I said carefully, do you think my grandmother's stroke was actually an accident? His expression darkened. I think Eleanor Hawthorne was a very thorough woman who'd made some very dangerous people nervous. And I think you need to be extremely careful about who you trust with that information. The flash drive felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my pocket as Detective Chen and I drove back to the station. Harold Finch's words kept echoing in my head. Eleanor had uncovered evidence of a much larger conspiracy. The thought that Grandma might have been silenced for what she knew made my skin crawl. We need to look at this drive immediately, Chen said, but when we tried to access it at the station, every file was password protected. Grandma had been thorough and paranoid. I tried obvious passwords first, her birthday, my birthday, Grandpa's name. Nothing worked. Then I remembered something from childhood, a phrase she used to whisper when she tucked me in at night. Asterisk trust but verify, little bird. Asterisk. The file's unlocked. What we found inside made Dad's embezzlement look like pocket change. Spreadsheets tracking stolen funds across 17 different financial advisors in 3 states, totaling over $2.3 million. Email chains discussing problematic clients and strategies for maintaining compliance. Bank routing numbers for accounts in Delaware, Nevada, and Wyoming. But the most damning evidence was a recorded phone conversation between Dad and someone named Vincent Moreau, dated just 5 days before Grandma's stroke. Eleanor's becoming a problem, Dad's voice came through my laptop speakers. She's been asking questions about the Clearwater transfers, and yesterday she requested copies of client statements going back 2 years. How much does she know? Moreau's voice had a slight accent I couldn't place. Too much. She's always been sharp with numbers, and she has access to Sarah's trust documentation. If she connects the dots. Can you handle it quietly? I'm working on it. But Vincent, if this goes bad, we're all exposed. The whole network. Detective Chen's face had gone pale. Sarah, we need to call the FBI. This isn't just local embezzlement anymore. The recording continued with details that made my blood run cold. Dad discussing which clients were expendable if they needed to liquidate quickly. Moreau mentioning something called the Phoenix Protocol, apparently a plan to disappear assets and identities if law enforcement got too close. Most chilling was the final exchange. What about your daughter? Moreau asked. Sarah won't be a problem. She trusts me completely, and even if she found something suspicious, who would believe her over her grieving father? The casual dismissal of my intelligence, the assumption that I'd be too naive or loyal to expose him, it crystallized everything I'd been feeling since that night at the cabin. Dad hadn't just stolen my money. He'd stolen my agency, my credibility, my right to be taken seriously. Chen was already on the phone with federal authorities when my cell rang. Unknown number again. Sarah Hawthorne? The voice was unfamiliar, professionally neutral. Yes. This is Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We understand you may have information relevant to an ongoing investigation. My hand started shaking. Which investigation? Operation Phoenix. We've been tracking a multi-state embezzlement ring for 18 months. Detective Chen tells me you've recently come into possession of evidence that might break the case wide open. The speed was dizzying. Within 2 hours, I was sitting in a federal building in Portland, surrounded by agents and prosecutors who treated Grandma's flash drive like a holy grail. Agent Martinez explained that they'd been trying to penetrate the network for over a year, but the financial advisors had been careful to compartmentalize their operations. Your grandmother's recordings are the first direct evidence we have of coordination between the various cells, Martinez said. But Sarah, I need to warn you, Vincent Moreau isn't just a financial advisor. He's the operational head of what we believe is a $50 million fraud network spanning 12 states. $50 million. The number was so large it felt abstract, meaningless. These people have killed to protect smaller secrets than what your grandmother uncovered, Martinez continued. Until we can arrest the key players, you're going to need federal protection. The words hit me like ice water. Protection from who? From anyone connected to Operation Phoenix who might view you as a threat to their operation. She leaned forward, her expression deadly serious. Sarah, your father is small time compared to some of these players. And if they think you can identify them or access more of your grandmother's evidence. She didn't need to finish the sentence. I was in danger, real danger, from people who viewed murder as a business expense. My phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number. Asterisk, we know what Eleanor left you. Stay quiet and stay safe. Asterisk. The text from Vincent Moreau's people was the last straw. I stared at my phone in the FBI field office, surrounded by federal agents, and realized I was done being afraid. Agent Martinez, I said, looking up from the threatening message. I want to help you catch them. She frowned. Sarah, these people are dangerous. Our protocol is to keep you in protective custody until. Until when? Until they disappear like my father almost did? Until they destroy evidence and vanish into offshore accounts? I stood up, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. My grandmother didn't gather this evidence so I could hide from it. She died trying to expose these people. The room went quiet. Agent Martinez exchanged glances with her partner, Agent Rodriguez, who'd been reviewing Grandma's files. What exactly are you proposing? Martinez asked. Vincent Moreau doesn't know my father's been arrested yet, does he? The plea agreement sealed the court records, and it only happened yesterday. Correct. We've been deliberately keeping that information contained. Then he still thinks I'm just Marcus Hawthorne's naive daughter. Someone who might have stumbled onto evidence but doesn't understand what she's found. I pulled up my father's contact information. What if I called him? Rodriguez looked skeptical. That's extremely dangerous. If Moreau suspects you're working with law enforcement. He won't suspect, because I'll give him exactly what he expects. A scared young woman who's in over her head and wants this to go away quietly. The plan took 3 hours to develop and 2 days to implement. Agent Martinez would monitor the call while I contacted Vincent Moreau using a phone number from Grandma's files. The goal was simple, get him to meet me in person, where federal agents could arrest him and seize whatever evidence he might be carrying. Remember, Martinez coached me as technicians fitted the wire. You're desperate and confused. You found some paperwork you don't understand, and you want him to make it disappear in exchange for your silence. I dialed Moreau's number at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday, my hands shaking with genuine nerves. Vincent Moreau speaking. Mr. Moreau? This is Sarah Hawthorne. Marcus Hawthorne's daughter. I let my voice tremble slightly. I found some things that belong to my grandmother, and I think you need to see them. A long pause. What kind of things, Sarah? Files. Bank statements. Some kind of recording that mentions your name. I took a shaky breath. Mr. Moreau, I don't want any trouble. I just want this to go away. Where are these files now? In my apartment. I haven't shown them to anyone, I swear. I don't know what to do. Another pause, longer this time. I could practically hear him calculating risks and opportunities. Sarah, you did the right thing calling me. These situations can be very complicated, and it's important to handle them properly. Can you meet me tonight? Somewhere private where we can discuss this calmly? He suggested the old Riverside Park Pavilion at 8 p.m., isolated enough for privacy, public enough to seem safe. Perfect for what the FBI had in mind. At 7:45, I sat on a park bench wearing enough recording equipment to stock a spy movie, watching Agent Martinez's surveillance team take positions around the pavilion. My heart was pounding so hard I worried the microphones would pick it up. Vincent Moreau arrived precisely on time, walking with the confident stride of someone who believed he was about to solve a major problem. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, wearing an expensive suit that suggested the fraud network had been very profitable. Sarah, he said, sitting beside me with practiced casualness. Thank you for reaching out. That took wisdom. I just want this nightmare to end, I said, letting genuine exhaustion creep into my voice. It can end very easily. You mentioned recordings and files. Where exactly are these items? I pulled out a manila folder containing photocopies of harmless documents, bait to keep him talking while the FBI recorded every word. This is just some of it, I said. There's more at home. Moreau examined the papers, his expression shifting from confident to concerned. Sarah, these documents could be very damaging to some important people. People who value their privacy. I don't care about important people. I just want my life back. That's completely understandable. His voice took on a paternal quality that reminded me sickeningly of my father. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to give me everything your grandmother left you, every file, every recording, every photograph. In exchange, there will be a substantial deposit in your bank account. Enough to start fresh anywhere you'd like. How much? $200,000. Clean money, no questions asked. It was almost insulting how little he thought my silence was worth, compared to the millions they'd stolen. And if I say no? Moreau's expression hardened slightly. Sarah, your grandmother was a lovely woman, but she got involved in things she didn't understand. That ended very poorly for her. The implicit threat sent ice through my veins, but it was also exactly what Agent Martinez needed to hear. Are you threatening me? I asked. I'm explaining reality. Some situations require permanent solutions to protect everyone involved. Those words, permanent solutions, would become the centerpiece of the prosecution's case against Vincent Moreau and 12 other members of Operation Phoenix. The FBI arrested him as he left the park, seizing laptops and phones that contained evidence linking the network to financial crimes in 15 states and 2 countries. 6 months later, I sat in another federal courthouse watching another sentencing hearing. This time, though, I wasn't alone. Mrs. Garrett sat beside me, along with Detective Chen and Agent Martinez, watching Vincent Moreau receive 23 years in federal prison for racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. The investigation had recovered $31 million in stolen assets and exposed a network that had victimized over 400 people across the country. My father, serving his own 9-year sentence, had cooperated fully in exchange for protection from Moreau's associates. Apparently even he had been afraid of the people he'd gotten involved with. Miss Hawthorne, Judge Patricia Henley said as the hearing concluded, "Your courage in assisting this investigation has helped restore stolen assets to hundreds of victims. The court commends your service to justice." Outside the courthouse, Agent Martinez handed me a check for $50,000, my share of the federal reward for breaking up Operation Phoenix. "What will you do now?" she asked. I looked at the check, then at the courthouse where my father was beginning his sentence, then at the city where I'd grown up believing I knew who I could trust. "Start over," I said. "But this time, I'll be the one controlling my future." The cabin my father had used to hide his crimes had been sold to pay restitution, but with the reward money, I could afford my own place. Somewhere I could build something honest, something that couldn't be stolen or manipulated or used to control me. For the first time in my life, I was truly free.